Welcome to session 42 of Through the Bible in 90 Days. Today we will look at three takeaways from Psalms chapter 69, verse 22 through Psalms chapter 89, verse 13. How prayer is a powerful response to suffering and injustice. How God remains faithful even when humans fail. And how God's love is unwavering and his covenant with his people is eternal. I'm Dr. J. David Taylor. Remember to subscribe, like, follow, comment, and share. Let's get started. Takeaway 1. Prayer is a powerful response to suffering and injustice. Now, in Psalm 69, verses 22 to 28, David continues his lament, asking God to punish his enemies who have wronged him, showing the importance of bringing our pain and distress before God in prayer. Now, even as David expresses deep anguish, he doesn't turn to vengeance, but trusts God's justice. This teaches believers today that prayer is an essential tool for dealing with suffering and injustice. So rather than taking matters into his own hand, we ought to bring our concerns to God, trusting that he will act in his perfect timing and according to his perfect will. See, prayer is not just about asking for relief. It's about surrendering our desires to God and seeking God's justice. Psalm 69:22 says it like this. Let their table become a snare before them, and that which should have been for their welfare, let it become a trap. Psalm 69:24 says, pour out thine indignation upon them, and let thy wrathful anger take hold of them. Takeaway 2. God remains faithful even when humans fail. In Psalm 73 and 89, we see a contrast between the struggles of humanity and the unwavering faithfulness of God. Psalm 73 expresses the psalmist's frustration about the prosperity of the wicked, while Psalms 89 celebrates God's covenant with David and God's faithfulness to his promises, even when David's descendants fail. Now, the reminder here is that human failure does not negate God's faithfulness. So for believers today, for us, this passage encourages us to remember that despite our shortcomings and challenges we face, God is faithful to fulfill his promises and will not forsake his people. So his covenant with us is sure and his promises are steadfast. In Psalms 89:1, the Bible says, I will sing of the mercies of the Lord forever. With my mouth will I make known thy faithfulness to all generations. Psalms 89:35 says, once have I sworn by my holiness that I will not lie unto David. Wow. Takeaway 3. God's love is unwavering and his covenant with his people is eternal. Now, in Psalms 89, the psalmist reflects on the greatness of God's covenant with David, emphasizing the unfailing love of God that ensures his promises to his people. So even when Israel suffers or when leaders fail, God's commitment to his covenant remains. This passage underscores the importance of understanding that God's love is not conditional on our performance, but is rooted in his eternal, unchanging character. So for believers today, it serves as a reminder that we are part of God's eternal covenant through Christ, and his love for us is unwavering and faithful no matter the circumstances. Psalms 33:5 said, the earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. Psalms 89:3 said, I have made a covenant with my chosen. I have sworn unto David, my servant. So have you, my friend, found yourself in a moment of despair, feeling like the world is against you and that no one understands the depth of your personal pain? See, David in Psalm 69 expresses his anguish and his frustration with his enemies, asking God for justice. Yet, while the overwhelming feeling of injustice is there, he turns to God in prayer. Similarly, Psalms 89 celebrates God's faithfulness, reminding us that even in difficult times, God remains true to his promises. So in the midst of our suffering and confusion, we can find hope in God's unshakable faithfulness. So, but the question is, how do we respond when we feel overwhelmed by injustices, overwhelmed by suffering, or overwhelmed by failure? See, the core challenge is this, how do we handle suffering and injustice, especially when it seems like the world is stacked up against us? But in Psalm 69, we see a raw expression of pain and frustrations, but also we see an invitation to turn to God in prayer, seeking God's justice. In Psalms 89, we are reminded of God's covenant faithfulness, even when human leaders fail. The real issue is whether we will trust God's justice and God's faithfulness even when things don't go the way we expect. The question isn't about whether we will suffer, but how we will respond when we do. Will we seek God's justice through prayer, or will we try to handle it on our own? See, my friend, we need to change our perspective. What if we saw suffering not as a reason to abandon God, but as an opportunity to seek his justice and experience his faithfulness? See, in Psalm 69, again, David didn't take vengeance into his own hand. He prays for justice, trusting God to act. In Psalms 89, it reminds us that even when we fail, God's covenant remains intact and his love for us is unchanging. Wow. So the breakthrough idea here, my friend, is just this. Suffering doesn't mean God has abandoned us. It can be a chance for us to experience God's justice, God's goodness, and God's unwavering faithfulness. When we face difficulties, it can draw us closer to God and help us trust in his promises. So my friend, this is your moment. Will you trust God's justice in your life, especially when it doesn't make sense? Just like David in Psalm 69, you can turn your frustrations and pain into prayer, trusting God to act. And like the psalmist in Psalms 89, you can hold fast to the truth that God's covenant is sure and his love is unfailing. See, don't let your suffering push you away from God. Let it bring you closer to his heart. Trust that God's justice is at work, even when you don't see it. So will you allow the truth to shape your response to the trials that you face today? I challenge you, my friend. Will you choose to respond to suffering by trusting God's justice and God's faithfulness? Just as David prayed for deliverance in the midst of his suffering and the psalmist celebrated God's eternal covenant, we are called to trust God even when we don't understand. Today is the day to shift your perspective. Let go of your desire for personal revenge and trust that God will act. Will you trust his sovereignty, his justice, and his unwavering love? Now is the time to surrender to his will, knowing that he will deliver and he will restore in his perfect timing. I have 3 personal declarations reflecting my personal willingness to align with God's divine will. I declare that I will trust in God's justice, even in the midst of suffering and injustice. I declare that I will surrender my pain and frustration to God, knowing that he is faithful to his promises. I declare that I will worship God for his unwavering love and sovereignty, knowing that he is working all things together for my good. My time is up, my friend. I'm Dr. J. David Taylor. Thank you for joining us. Please remember to subscribe, like, follow, comment, and share. I so look forward to seeing you next time.